Engagement with Karen Bulvis of HR Benefit Solutions. Karen is certified through the Society of Human Resource Management and was a founding person in the licensing of certified HR professionals. She spent time as an Executive Vice President of Human Resources at DataSat Digital Entertainment, where she directed all aspects of HR, including leadership development, creation of policies, and payroll management. Human Resources at BTS Inc., where she led the human resource efforts in business strategy, acquisitions, and mergers. Karen has held human resource development and executive management positions with national organizations like Intel, Aircom, Christ Sister, and Valley Presbyterian Hospital. Karen is a certified senior professional in human resources and SPHR, and an SHRM certified senior certified professional. She's a district chair and on the board of the Southern California Professions in Human Resource Association, PIRA, and which is a member of the National Association, SHRM, and she's also president of the Woodland Hills chapter of PIRA. Karen is also a volunteer speaker and consultant for Women's Economic Ventures of Ventura in Santa Barbara County and serves on the board of Habitat for Humanity. Robert, since 2008, has achieved success in both corporate world and as an entrepreneur. Robert saw a trend emerging in the workforce where the traditional work system of command and control would no longer be as effective as in the past. With this insight, Robert founded a new consulting practice known today as Black Diamond Leadership, where he works with leadership in transition from a transitional model to one that is more collaborative, nimble, and where each person is a contributing partner to the business. Robert has helped hundreds of companies with high-performance strategies, strategic consulting, executive leadership development, emotional intelligence, presentation coaching, building teams, and creating work environments based on trust and also self-training. Robert's an executive and business coach also, and a group facilitator, and he has worked with CEOs of Fortune 500 companies as well as small and mid-cap organizations. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Robert and Karen. I'm going to put myself on mute so there's no echo on my part. If you have a question, please put it in the chat box, and Robert and Karen will be able to see it. Therefore, I'm turning it over to you guys. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Barry. Welcome, everyone. This is obviously Karen. Robert has a deeper voice than I do. So today we're going to talk about employee engagement, and what we're going to go over is some statistics, what the definitions of an engaged employee is, a disengaged employee, and we're going to challenge you to break the mold on what it is that you're doing today, and also go into some leadership ideas for you so you can take it back to your organization. So the first is we cannot ignore engaged employees anymore. We're looking at the 3 generations in the workplace. You're looking at the retiring boomers, you're looking at millennials coming into the workforce, and it comes with a different perspective. And the other part of that is there's a real need and a competition for really qualified workers and talent out there. So all of these things are going to help become an employer of choice. So with the statistics, we referenced a lot with the Gallup poll. Gallup has been putting out this survey for many, many years and has lots and lots and lots of information regarding engaged employees. So great resource, but it really isn't anything new. What we want to look at here is what it costs to replace an employee. It's up to 200% of their annual salary. And in a tight labor market, we really need to be and have that competitive advantage. And again, like I said, become the employer of choice. So the 200% here takes into consideration the time you do not have an employee doing the work that needs to be done, the time that it takes away from other employees who are interviewing for this position, as well as the time that it takes to get your new employee up to speed and trained, on your organization, what's important in your companies, as well as the job itself. So looking at engaged workforce, U.S. employees are 33% engaged versus 70% in your world's best organizations. So there's a disconnect there, and you read all the time about how Americans work so much harder than any other country. So I think we need to take a look at that and see if we engaged our workforce more, if that statistic would be raised up to where we'd be a little more competitive with the best organizations worldwide. The other here is where people that are actually looking for jobs or have the feeds come in at work while they are working is 51%. That's a big, big number there. And like I said, the millennials, they want something different. They want a job that accelerates their growth. That's important to them. Gen Xers are pretty close up there too. Baby boomers, not so much. But again, this is something that you need to look at going forward with the talent that is in that pool. And the statistic to measure that is 21% of employees strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them to do outstanding work. So these are really some good numbers here that we need to look at and really take some action on. So, Robert?
Great. So we're going to look at the ROI of employee engagement. And what we look at is, where does happiness increase and also performance increase? So I'm going to share some statistics with you. And these statistics come from companies that are in the upper right-hand quadrant, or they're like the top 25% of companies that are rated very high in employee engagement. So the first slide is that these companies report a 41% less in absenteeism, 54% lower turnover rate, 70% fewer employee safety instances, and if you're in the healthcare world, 58% fewer patient safety incidents, 40% fewer quality incidences. And remember, these are those that are heavily investing in training, development, and employee engagement. A 17% higher productivity, 20% higher sales, and they're also reporting 21% higher profitability. Karen, back to you.
Okay. So let's take a look at what employee engagement is and what a disengaged employee looks like. In the picture here, you see all of the great perks. Some companies, and a lot of times that's what you think employee engagement is. These things help, but it really isn't the definition of an engaged employee. So talent culture defines an engaged employee as when employees are engaged, they adopt the vision, values, and purpose of the organization they work for. They become passionate contributors, innovative problem solvers, and stunning colleagues. So when they're looking at an engaged worker, they're invested in their work and the company, and they're motivated, and they motivate others, and it could be just infectious that their motivation goes on with it. They come up with great ideas to improve and expand and solve problems, and at the same time raise issues so that everybody is on the same page and they're working, for the greater good. An employee that's not engaged, this could be an employee that is doing their job just fine, but they're working, paycheck to paycheck. And then these employees are the ones that are harder to identify, because like I said, they're doing their work pretty well. But if you take them out of their comfort zone and ask them for ideas, how do they respond? Do they have any ideas? Are they exasperated with that question even? Are they taking more breaks, more smoke breaks, more snacks, kind of deriving some fulfillment from unhealthy habits. When you're celebrating with your team, are they part of that celebration, or are they kind of on the outskirts and not really involved with it there? The others, are they showing interest in trends, ideas, and sharing ideas? Do they know about your industry? Do they know about your market? Are they showing any curiosity for the bigger picture of your company? The other is, do you hear that they're not pursuing any outside activities on the weekend, kind of lethargic, laying around, kind of just doing nothing there? And the other question is are the managers challenging the employees with work assignments outside of what their normal assignments are? So these are, good indicators there. From there, you have the actively disengaged employee. These employees are fundamentally disconnected from the job. They're not only unproductive, but their attitudes and perceptions spread through the company. It results in poor performance, lowered job satisfaction, and overall decreased productivity. And it's not just their productivity that's decreased, it's everybody that's around them. Because if you're thinking about it, they're not really working. They may be complaining, they could be at odds with other people. So it's the people that they're working with or have these confrontations with where their productivity is decreased. Even your actively engaged employee would have lower productivity with an actively disengaged coworker. And the other is, are they absent and late, poor quality of work? These are easier to identify. These employees are kind of like a cancer that's in part of the team. But the question becomes, how are you dealing with this employee? And are you taking steps, to correct those things? So disengaged employees are estimated to cost the U.S. between $450 billion to $550 billion. So those are huge, huge numbers there, and it's really something that we all have to pay attention to, large companies, small companies, all the way through. So with that, the first thing we have to do is unlearn what you have learned. So I'm going to give you some examples and show you some companies who are really kind of breaking the mold and getting away from, your traditional benefits and things that they're doing for employees. So with ABC Company, one of their guiding factors is to increase customer engagement through employee engagement. So this is recognizing that your employees are key to keep your clients and your customers happy and keep them engaged and keep them coming back. The other here is Tower Paddleboards. This is a local company in San Diego. You may be familiar with him. The owner of the company went on Shark Tank and absolutely bombed. He forgot everything that he was thinking when he was there, but Mark Cuban still invested in him. What this company has done, and they had 10 employees, they went from working 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, from your traditional 40-hour week. In 2016, their earnings reached $9 million. And what they've done for their employees is they're using profit sharing to make up for the earnings that they lost with the shorter work week. And it ended up that they would make more per hour with this compensation scheme than they had if they worked a traditional 40 hours a week. So my question to you is, in each of us, when we go on vacation and we're focused on that work that all has to be done before we leave, this is what this company has done, has created, that focus in that 5 hours a day. Reebok, with their CrossFit brand, they converted some empty warehouse space into CrossFit gyms. And worldwide, their employees collectively lost 4,000 pounds, and 1,000 of their employees are CrossFitters now. Full Contact is an interesting one. So this employer will pay their employees to go on vacation, so the regular wages, but if they take their vacation fully unplugged, no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no meetings, they will pay them a bonus of $7,500. That's how important it is for the employees there to take vacation, and how that the company um, encourages that. Another company along the same lines is Bamboo HR. They pay $2,000 towards the employees' travel for their vacations. And feedback they've gotten from one of their employees is, it has allowed me to strengthen my marriage, to devote time to my children, and to spoil and give back to my parents, but also to treat myself. That is somebody that really values what the company has done for them, and is really engaged, but it's also recognizing that there's a whole person with the company. It's not just an employee, I would say. And then Richard Branson, along the same lines, the way you treat your employees is the way they will treat your customers. So there's your inspiration to break the mold. So let's talk a little bit about what we used to call work-life balance, which really now, today, is work-life integration. So a perfect example of that was, I'm sure many of you saw the clip on the BBC interview with Professor Robert Kelly. He's an expert in South Korea. So he, was there with this very, very serious interview, and in comes his little girl, kind of dancing in the background, and then the baby comes in their little walker, and then you see mom sliding down the hallway, gathering the kids and going out of there. And he didn't miss a beat, but the interviewer didn't miss either. He noticed and he acknowledged it, and it became the funniest TV moment in 2017. But that's the integration. That's the world we live in now, and it's a little more accepted, much more accepted than it was, years ago. So with that, if I were to ask you what you would want more time, what would you want more of? How many of you would respond time? And with that in mind, things that I'd like you to consider is to take a look at your policies and alternative work arrangements, flexible schedules. If you have an employee that wants to coach a team there, is it possible for them to come in early, leave early, go coach, and then maybe pick up some more work in the afternoon, later in the afternoon or in the evening? And maybe that's the time that they get their most work done. So keep that in mind and take a look at that. There's the family care situations. Could be something, with parents, or children, or a disabled family member, where you have an employee that may need to come in later in order to take care of the family situation, but then they're able to work later. That means that the employee has to be there at 8 to 5. That's a very industrial age mindset, where it's a lot of more manufacturing. We're much more technology driven now, and again, that's that integration rather than, you go to work and the work is done there and then come home and that's there. So the other is working remotely. Again, there, family leaves, sabbaticals, those are other areas too to consider. So we hire employees and we interview them before we hire them. Many times we interview them as they're leaving the company. And I would say, what happens in between? So I like to do what I call a stay interview. And at that point in time, you can re-employ the employee and get that engagement with them. So typically some of the questions you would ask in this stay interview are, what makes you anxious? What makes you happy here? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? And this is where you can ask, what ideas and suggestions do you have with the company? What do you need from your supervisor? What do you need from the company? And again, this is a question of where do you want to go? What do you want to learn? That's all, centering around the professional development there. And I urge you to look beyond just the professional development within your company, because when you're looking at millennials, you don't have that mindset of, working 20, 30 years in one place. They're going to go from one place to another. And if you can develop them and they do end up leaving and, get some more experience from outside of your company, they're going to remember that you took that time and you helped them develop their career. They may come back later to you as a very well-groomed company, different ideas that they've gathered from their experiences, and really help your companies again. So this is an opportunity to open the door and talk to employees, which is really key in getting the engagement there. So now it's back to Robert.
Excellent. So just to help illustrate Karen's point about having remote employees, I recently did some work with a company that has their employees spread all across the globe. And it doesn't really matter where they're working from as long as the work gets done. And they shared a story about one employee who just felt like he wanted to go to Thailand. And he stayed there for 6 months and basically had Wi-Fi by the beach. And that was one of his offices while he was in Thailand. And this company has experienced a dramatic increase in productivity versus a decrease in productivity. But they've also set up their company from top to bottom to enable this type of work environment. So the real question is do your employees want what your workplace is selling? Are they engaged in the work process? Are the benefits and the structure of your organization aligned with what employees of today are looking for? Of course, I always hear the big issue is how do I get my millennials to be more productive? And how do I change them? How do I get them to work like me? And we then go to a very sobering conversation where I look at them directly in the eyes and I say to them, it is not about changing the millennials because that's a no-win game. It's really about changing how we run our organizations and how we lead that engages millennials. So a format or a paradigm that I'm very, very fond of is the high performance organization. And we're going to take a look at how does a high performance organization differentiate from a traditional paradigm or a traditional organization of command and control. But in high performance, it is vital. Yes.
Excuse me one moment. Can we check if people are still on the webinar? We had an internet connection issue, and I'm not sure if everyone's seeing what you're talking about.
Okay.
I'm going to restart it, see what happens.
Peter says I'm still on.
I'm sorry?
Peter just typed in that he's still on. Peter Ettinger.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to back on mute, and guys, go ahead.
Okay. So how to move to a high performance organization, the process of strategic and operational planning and ensuring that the mission and the vision of the company really does translate down and is embraced the entire organization. Developing your leaders in how to improve trust and emotional intelligence and communication is a vital component of it. Building high performance teams that are collaborative and have a team charter. Having systems in the processes of the company that align to the vision, mission, and strategic direction of the company and the operation of the company. Oftentimes, when it comes to creating a strategic design, it's usually done by a consultant who comes in and writes up a nice, beautiful document, and that document gets put into a 3-ring binder and it's put on the shelf, and then it's dusted off once a year, maybe. In fact, I ask companies, when's the last time we looked at your strategic design document? And sometimes I hear, well, 1, 2, 3 years ago, or I don't even know even one existed. So it's vital to create a strategic design document that's not done by necessarily an outside consultant, but it's a facilitated process that involves key members of the company so that there is ownership and buy-in in that process. So I mentioned traditional work groups or traditional organizations and high performance teams. The traditional work group we're very, very familiar with, which is command and control. Siloing is a result of this. And the way that this typically works is that you have a department head and they can't talk to other department heads unless they go through the proper channels or chain of command. I experienced this once in my professional career when I was working with a company in a capacity of sales, and I wanted to talk to somebody in marketing. And so I picked up the phone and I called somebody in marketing and I was discussing some things that I thought would be better. Within a couple of hours, I was called into my manager's office and I was told to follow the proper chain of command. When we shift over to high performance teams, it enabled it to be self-governing with facilitated guidance. So in this situation, you see the leader is off to the side, and the leader, we like to use the term leading from the balcony. So not being in the middle of everything, but being able to look and see how the team is operating, ensure that the team is aligned with the goals and the vision and mission of the company, that they have the resources that they need to do their job properly. The leader breaks down barriers in organizations that are preventing the team from working well together. And some great examples or early examples of high performance organizations are some of the Japanese automotive companies. And I heard a story, I don't remember which company it was, but that they had one of their plants that was manufacturing a component for their car caught on fire and was destroyed, and it was going to take 6 to 7 months to bring it back online again. Well, the manager or the director of that particular factory reached out to a competitor and struck a deal with them on his own to have them supply the same parts. And they're able to get that product line or get the car line back online again within a couple of weeks versus 6 or 7 months. And that person was empowered to do that. They didn't reprimand him for it. He was empowered. So I mentioned vision, mission, and values, and boy, we could spend a lot of time talking about this. But I think that the most important aspect of it, and this is what I hear from millennials all the time, they want to know that the mission and the values of the company are real, that the company is living those values and is living the mission, and that everybody from the organization, from the CEO down to somebody in the mailroom, is aligned with that vision and that they embrace it, live it. This is what is vital to millennials and upcoming workers, and it's also one of the very key important components of becoming a high performance organization. In a high performance organization, the relationship between employees and the company are as follows. Employees are viewed as partners in the business. They're empowered with information, resources, authority, and support to solve problems. And they make decisions and are fully responsible for their part in the business. I think if we go back up to bullet number 2, is that where they're empowered with information. The traditional way of how companies were organized is you were told to go do your job and don't worry about anything else in the company. You do your job and you have no idea how your job is linking into the other aspects of what the company provides. So in a high performance organization, employees are empowered with information and they understand how their role fits into the overall role of the company. Also, what's important to new workers is that the company is involved in some kind of philanthropic activities. Either the company's mission is designed for that, or that the company enables employees to be able to do volunteer work, or the company sponsors it. So we're going to shift into some leadership and how leadership applies to employee engagement. And I found this on the internet about 6 months ago, and I love it. A bad leader can take a good staff and destroy it, causing the best employees to flee and the remainder to lose all motivation. So a big part of high performance leadership is being an
Robert, if
empower.
you can hear me, we've lost your audio. Are you there?
I'm here. Can't hear me? Hello? Michelle can still hear me. And Peter can still hear me. Hello? Okay, well, I'm going to keep on going. Thanks, Peter. I was just thinking the same thing. So there's two types of leaders, those who lead through control and coercion, and those who lead by inspiring and empowering others. That is so key to a high performance environment and engaged employees. So many employees complain about their supervisors and they complain about their leaders, that they are more task managers and they lead from behind, if you will, barking orders and directing commands at people, versus by inspiring employees to do extraordinary work, to coach employees when they're not doing well, to really be involved in improving their ability to get the job done and their overall leadership and development. As Karen shared that one statistic, that the vast majority of millennials are very interested in working with a company that's going to further their development and their career. If you're not doing that, then they're going to be looking for new opportunities. So let's take a look at the 6 principles of empowering leaders. So an empowering leader, they have the passion to realize their vision. They drive their vision through the whole organization. They're very adept at building and sustaining trust in an organization. And we're going to talk more about trust in a moment and emotional intelligence and how those are connected. An empowering leader is also egoless and humble. In a previous company that I owned, we were in the event production business, and a client would come up to me and say, "Robert, you're extraordinary, you did a great job." And I would turn around and say, I'm just one component of this team. There's people that are working behind the scenes, and people that you've worked with that are really the ones that are making this happen. I'm just conducting the team. It's empowering leaders inspire commitment and motivation. They're organizational and social architects, and they act and institute change from positive beliefs about people and situations. So we're going to look at the trust imperative, because one of the biggest breakdowns of employee morale or employee engagement is when there's a lack of trust with leadership, with fellow employees, within the organization in general. And there's a trust model, a trust imperative, which has 3 core elements. It has integrity, which is we believe integrity is belief an individual acts according to a set of principles or values that can be counted on to keep commitments and do what they say they will do. Competence is how one performs. We believe that the individual is capable of successfully performing his or her roles and responsibilities. And then there's compassion, how one relates to others. We believe that an individual cares about the needs of others as well as his or her own good of everyone. Now, not all dimensions are of equal importance at any given time or in all relationships. However, these 3 elements of trust are essential to relationship building. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into these 3 areas, and then we'll move on. So on building trust begins with us, you. Builds with oneself. It is impossible to have trustworthy or being trustworthy, and it means being trustworthy means that I act from the 3 elements of trust. So again, going back to competence. Am I technically capable of fulfilling my roles? Do I achieve desired business results? What training or experience do I need to become more competent? Do I need to consider changing roles if I'm not fully competent. Compassion. Do I listen to other points of view? Act in a manner that others perceive to be fair? Am I a team player? Do I understand? Do I relinquish protection of my territory for the good of the whole? Um, do I seek win-win situations? And do I show respect for everyone? Then under integrity, to what extent have I applied my personal purpose and guiding principles? How consistently do I act from these? Do I keep my commitments? And do I say what I do? Am I consistent? Am I predictable in my personal behavior? Here's a really great quote from Roger Staubach. If you don't have trust inside your company, then you can't transfer it to your customers. Let that sink in for a moment. So trust in leadership and with your colleagues is directly connected to emotional intelligence. And I would assert that without a high degree of emotional intelligence, trust is very difficult to have. There are a lot of definitions of emotional intelligence out there. And I'm going to use a relatively simple, sorry, give me one second here. A very simple definition of emotional intelligence that relates to the business environment. So emotional intelligence is being aware that our emotions drive our behavior and impact everyone around us, both positively and negatively. And learning how to manage those emotions, both our own and others, especially when under pressure, leads to a higher degree of emotional intelligence. And then there's models that you can use to improve your emotional intelligence. And the one that I like is called the response chain. And we focus in on key moments. And a key moment is something that occurs that demands a response or is confronting. When we have a key moment, we view that key moment through our paradigms or how we see the world. And then we give that key moment meaning. We have feelings about it, both physiological and emotional feelings about it. And then we have behavior. We act out in a certain way. Depending on how we behave, we are either taking the pathway of survival or the pathway of self-mastery or emotional intelligence. Now, there is a moment of choice in this process that while you're going down this response chain, you can actually stop, pause, and regroup yourself. So a great example of this was a time when I was going through my training in all of this, and I was still running my event production company. And it was an event that I had done for the last 10 years, but this time there was 3 of them in a row. I was exhausted. I was up until 2 o'clock in the morning, getting to the event and setting things up. I was up again at 6 in the morning for this lunch meeting. And what happened was that we didn't pay close enough attention to how things looked. So in the back of the room where we were all stationed, that we had drape around our station, so we would hide all the cables and cords. There was a gap in the drape. And the maitre d' of the event came up to me and said, you know, if this doesn't look right, you need to fix it. And in that moment, I had a key moment. And I knew in that moment that I had blown it. But instead of responding in a positive manner, I got really upset about it. And I said, don't worry, I'll fix it. And so he started to walk away and look back at me. And I said, what the hell's your problem? And he looked at me and said, what's your problem? And I stood up. Now, those of you on the call, you don't know that I'm 6'5". I'm a big guy. And I stood up. I was already on a riser. And that moment, I noticed that my client was sitting in the room. And I said, okay, I got to calm down. And I sat down for a moment. I had a moment of choice right there where I realized that there was a different way for me to handle this. One of my team members said, I'll fix the drape. It got fixed. I walked over to the maitre d'. I said, you know what? You're right. I'm glad you pointed it out because we're both committed to the same thing, to deliver an extraordinary experience for our mutual client. Come and take a look at the drape and see if it meets your standards. He was shocked by that. But he came over, looked at it, thanked me, and from that point on, something miraculous happened. We became partners in the business. And he started asking me for my opinion about things. I asked about his opinion, and we were almost attached at the hip. for the remainder of the event. And it was a highly, highly successful event. So much so that for me, a company that was attending the event came up to me and said, can we hire you right now to produce our conference that's happening in 3 weeks in San Francisco? And that company happened to be Qualcomm. So remember that here's a statistic that is really important, that 49% of employees who are disengaged is due to problems with their direct supervisors. So without developing our leadership in such a way that we keep employees engaged and they have emotional intelligence and trust, it's going to be very difficult to maintain employee engagement. I already touched upon this slide again that Karen talked about earlier. It's important to know that millennials, and I would also venture that the next generation coming up, that a job that accelerates their growth is critical to them, and if it's not there, they will be out looking for something else. So the big question is, what is the cost of doing nothing, of not paying attention to employee engagement? And we already saw one figure of the cost of turnover and then the cost of low engaged employees. For leaders and owners of business, the cost is also very emotional and frustrating. And they find themselves having to do more and more of the day-to-day work because turnover is so high. I recently called on a client that has a 45% turnover rate. Unfortunately, there's nothing I could do for this person because this person stated that they were not coachable and that the problem was not with them, but it was with all their employees. At that point, they knew that this project was going to be a failure. So that's the end of that part. And I think, Karen, we're back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. So what we want to really, the 4 key takeaways from today is the changing work. So we talked about the millennials, again, the technology. Those are things that, going forward, you're going to have to really take into consideration. These are the employees in the pool today. So these are the top talent that you want, and there is a shortage of qualified people. So you really want to be able to offer your employees, offer the people the potentials that you want to hire, the very best workforce for them. So you want to take into consideration, your mission, your vision, your values while you're interviewing and talking to the people to make sure that everything is in alignment there. And you want to be that employer of choice. You want to be the company that these qualified people want to work for. And, again, take a look at the whole person with it there. Take into consideration your policies and, how can you break that mold? It doesn't take multi-million-dollar companies to be able to do things to attract the best talent and to really keep the employees, retain them, and then also keep them engaged. And you absolutely cannot ignore how by doing all of those things, your profitability will increase. And that is the success of any company. And that's really, the bottom line of what we want to do. So if there are any questions, we can take them now. I think either type them in or it's probably the best way to do that. And Gary, I think I'll need your help to see any. I don't see any right now.
I'm seeing a question, Karen, and I think this is really for you. How do you ensure, or how do you bring on employees that are a good cultural fit with your organization?
Well, one, you need to know what your culture is and be able to talk about it. So I recommend getting your employees' perspective on what that culture is and look to your successful employees and get that definition. And then also work with either your marketing department or somebody that has a flair for marketing to be able to articulate that in a way that is attractive and to bring that in. The other is when you're interviewing cycle, ask questions about the culture. Ask the candidates, what interests them, how would they see themselves fitting into the culture, specifically, in certain areas. If it's the charity piece of it that the company is a proponent of, why is that employee interested in that? What have they done in the past, to help a similar, cause? The other is, independent work versus teamwork. So phrase your questions around the culture, make sure that that's included, and focus your interview around the culture. So a perfect example of that is, I believe it's Netflix, has a whole interviewing cycle in a team. And when somebody comes in to interview, they start, in the front, but the interview conference room is all the way at the back of the building. And in between there, somebody will come out of their cubicle and talk and ask a question. That's part of the interview process, how that candidate interacts and responds to that interruption. So, those are, some really key things to look at. And again, I'm going to say break the mold.
Yeah, Karen, one of the questions that I'm asked all the time is, what do I do with the employee that is too valuable to let go, but too disruptive to keep? And they ask, well, what can we do about that employee? And I tell them that, I show them the first step is to work with somebody like you or somebody like me to coach that employee and hopefully help them see what this behavior is doing and really focus on what their commitments are in the workplace. And unfortunately, if they continue to be disruptive, we need to weigh out the cost of keeping that employee and the damage that person might be doing to the culture of the company, and then replacing that employee. So, well, I think that's about it. We're at 10 to 11, Barry.
That's a great question, and I wanted to first thank Karen Bublis of HR Business Solutions and Robert Grossman of Black Diamond Leadership for an excellent webinar on employee engagement. If you have any questions, their email addresses and phone numbers are on the screen. And as always, we recorded this webinar, and we'll get out the slide deck and the recorded webinar within the next week. So thank you very much for joining us. Sorry for the little technical difficulties we had, but we always move on. Have a great day.
Thanks, Barry.